sharp edge was hiding inside an ordinary rock.
Not a sword, not a machine.
Just one stone in one hand struck against another until a thin flake snapped free. But that flake could be sharper than a tooth. It could cut meat, scrape hide, slice plant fibers, and help crack open a bone for the marrow inside.
That sounds almost too small to matter. Humans have always picked things up. Other animals use objects too. So why should a broken rock count as one of the biggest turning points in human history?
Because the important invention was not simply finding a useful stone. It was learning that you could make a useful edge on purpose, and make it again tomorrow. Once that knowledge could be repeated and passed on, a hand no longer ended at its fingertips.
This is the story of how a simple rock began changing the way early human relatives ate, learned, and eventually changed the world itself. For most of their existence, our distant relatives did not have claws built for tearing through thick hide. They did not have the massive canine teeth of a predator. Their bodies could gather fruit, dig, carry, throw, and climb. That some foods were locked behind problems: tough skins, sinew, hard shells, and bones full of energy-rich marrow. Then imagine seeing a stone break. One fragment leaves a clean, sharp edge. The discovery may have begun with accident, curiosity, or both. Archaeology cannot show us the first thought inside anyone's head, but it can show us the result. Stones deliberately struck in ways that leave recognizable scars and flakes sharp enough to work as cutting edges. The classic early toolkit is called Oldowan, named after Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. It was not one perfect first tool. It was a small system. A hammerstone hit another stone. That second stone, the core, lost flakes, and those flakes were often the real prize, portable sharp edges made when needed. That is the first big shift in this story. A rock was no longer just an object you happened to find. It became raw material. You could look at a landscape and see not only stones, but future edges. And that changed what early hominins could do with food. A sharp flake can separate meat from bone far more efficiently than fingers alone. A hammerstone can pound. Broken bone can reveal marrow. Tools could also help process tough plant foods. They did not turn every early human relative into a great hunter overnight. In many cases, we cannot tell whether an animal was hunted, scavenged, or found after another predator's meal. But the edge expanded the menu. Here is the line worth remembering. The first stone tools did not make early humans stronger. They made the world easier to open. At first, it seems like the obvious answer is food. More access to food, therefore more tool use. And food was probably a huge part of it, but the deeper you look, the less neat the story becomes. For decades, people often imagined that the first stone tools belonged neatly to the first members of our own genus, Homo. Then, in Kenya, researchers reported deliberately modified stone artifacts from Lomekwi 3, dated to about 3.3 million years ago. That is older than the classic Oldowan record. The tools are different enough that the researchers proposed another name, Lomekwian. In other words, the first chapter may have been written before Homo even appeared. That does not give us a clean new hero. It gives us a mystery. Fossils and tools rarely come with a label saying, "I made this." The Lomekwi discoveries tell us that deliberate stoneworking may have begun earlier and with a different kind of hominin than the old textbook story allowed. They do not let us confidently identify a single inventor. But the next clue tells us why the behavior was worth repeating. At Nyayanga, near Lake Victoria in Kenya, archaeologists found Oldowan tools dating roughly 3 million to 2.6 million years ago, alongside animal remains, including cut-marked hippopotamid bones. Marks and wear on the materials support the idea that the tools were used to process large animals and plants. Picture the difference. A dead hippo, or even part of one left by predators, is an enormous pile of calories protected by skin, connective tissue, and bone.
Bare hands can do very little with it. A sharp flake changes the calculation. A pounding stone changes it again. But we need to be careful here. Those bones do not prove that early tool users killed every animal they processed. And fossils found near tools do not prove beyond doubt which species held them. The evidence gives us something more interesting than a simple myth. It shows early human relatives building a practical relationship with their environment, using learned technology to get at resources that bodies alone could not easily reach. That relationship may be the real turning point. A tool is an extra body part you can make outside your body. Your teeth are fixed, your nails are fixed. But a sharp flake can be created, replaced, carried, and used for a new problem. If one edge breaks, make another. If the stone is poor, look for a better one. The same hand that picks fruit can now cut hide. The same group that shares food can share a technique. And technique is where the story becomes human in a deeper way. Making a useful flake is not as effortless as two rocks clacking together. You have to hit in a useful place, at a useful angle, with enough force, but not the wrong kind of force. Experiments with modern people show that even Oldowan-style flaking takes practice. Watching helps, but deliberate teaching, gesture, and language-like instruction can make the skill travel more effectively from person to person. That does not mean stone tools invented language. We do not have a 3-million-year-old lesson plan, and no one can listen to the first toolmakers speak. But it does suggest a powerful possibility. Once a group depended on techniques that were difficult to rediscover, helping others learn became more valuable. This is where a rock stops being just a rock. It becomes a memory stored outside the brain. Not a written memory, not yet. But a learned sequence. Choose this stone, hold it this way, strike here, keep the sharp piece. One person learns, another watches. A child practices. A group carries the habit forward. Each generation does not have to begin at zero. That is culture in its most practical form. Useful behavior surviving longer than the individual who discovered it. And over time, the tools changed. By about 1.76 million years ago, early humans were making much larger cutting tools, including hand axes shaped by removing flakes more systematically around an edge. The jump is visible. A rough flake can solve an immediate problem. A hand axe suggests more planning, more repeated skill, and a longer technological tradition. Researchers who ask modern people to make these different tools see a similar pattern in the brain. Basic Oldowan flaking leans heavily on visual inspection and hand movement. More complex Acheulean work recruits broader, higher-order networks. That does not tell us exactly what an ancient brain looked like, but it reminds us that technology is not separate from thinking. It is thinking made visible in stone. So did a simple rock change human history? Yes, but not because one clever ancestor picked up a stone and suddenly became modern. The evidence does not support that fairy tale. There was no single first human, no single first inventor, and no instant leap from flake to civilization. The better answer is slower and stranger. Early hominins learned that the environment contained hidden possibilities. A stone could become an edge. An edge could open food. A skill could be practiced. A practiced skill could be shared. And shared techniques could accumulate until the world no longer looked like a fixed set of limits. By the time humans built cities, wrote books, and sent machines into space, we were still doing the same basic thing. Seeing something ordinary and asking what else it could become. That is what makes that first sharp flake so powerful. It was not just a piece of broken rock. It was a tiny decision to stop adapting only to the world as it was and start reshaping it. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Nuro for more strange human history and hidden brain behavior. Tap the bell so you do not miss the next one, and share this video with someone who would enjoy it. Thanks for watching.